First time I've been back since the changes to the golf course, and I like what they've done with everything and the greens and changing the grass in the fairways. And yeah, it's gonna be a good week.
Somewhere in Memphis this weekend, the world number 2 golfer said 4 words in a scoring tent that no reigning Masters champion ever wants to say out loud on camera. I'm not telling you what they were yet. What I will tell you is this. Scottie Scheffler was standing close enough to watch it happen live, and even he couldn't do anything but watch. There's also a quiet number buried in the FedExCup standings right now that tells you exactly what this week cost Rory McIlroy, and it's smaller than you'd think, which somehow makes it worse. Stick around because what actually happened over these 4 rounds is stranger and a lot more revealing than one bad round of golf. Let's rewind to the very beginning of this tournament because the disaster didn't start on Sunday, it started 3 days earlier, and it never really let up. McIlroy walked into TPC Southwind for the first time since finishing tied for 40th at the Open Championship almost a full month earlier. Rusty, by his own admission. Playing alongside world number 1 Scottie Scheffler in the marquee group, which meant every single mistake was happening directly next to the best player on the planet, under a spotlight McIlroy couldn't escape. The opening round was rough. Level par heading into the final 3 holes, which honestly felt like a reasonable start given the layoff. Then it completely fell apart. A dropped shot at 16, another dropped shot at 17, and then, on the closing par 4 18th, his tee shot found the water. Double bogey to finish. 4 over par 74, 9 shots behind the early leaders, and a start so ugly that reporters were already writing disaster into their headlines before round 2 even teed off. Round 2 didn't offer much relief either. McIlroy carded a 70, clawing back a few strokes but nowhere near enough to erase the damage from day 1. By Saturday, a 72 kept him buried well outside contention, completely off the pace being set by Scottie Scheffler, who was busy putting together one of the most dominant performances of the entire season just a few groups ahead. Then came Sunday, the round that gave this story its headline. McIlroy's final round started in a way that made the whole week feel like it was collapsing in real time. Bogeys piled up early. The kind of start that makes broadcasters stop talking about strategy and start talking about body language instead. For a stretch on that front 9, it genuinely looked like McIlroy might finish the week even further down the leaderboard than anyone expected. But here's where it gets interesting, because McIlroy didn't just fold, he fought back. 5 birdies over his final 10 holes turned a disastrous morning into something that at least resembled respectable golf. For a few holes, it actually looked like a real recovery story was happening in real time, the kind of comeback narrative that makes for a great highlight reel. Fans watching at home started to believe the week might end on a high note after all. It didn't. Back-to-back bogeys at the 17th and 18th closed out his tournament on the exact same sour note it began on 3 days earlier. A final round 72. A 4-round total of 74, 70, 72, 72. And a finish of 66th place in a golf tournament that mattered more than almost any other event on the calendar this season. Now here's the number that should really make you pause before writing this off as just one bad week. 66th place. Compare that to what happened here in 2024, the last time McIlroy played this exact tournament on this exact course, a tie for 68th. So on paper, this counts as an improvement. Read that again. Finishing 66th and calling it progress tells you everything about how difficult this golf course and honestly this entire season has been for one of the most talented players alive. McIlroy wasn't even close to alone in his misery at TPC Southwind this week. Scotland's Robert McIntyre posted the single worst round of his entire PGA Tour career at this same event, carding a 12 over 82 that forced him to withdraw before the tournament even continued. 12 over. When a player of McIntyre's caliber implodes that badly on the same course, in the same week, it becomes a little harder to write McIlroy's struggles off as purely personal. Something about this golf course, in this heat, seemed determined to expose even the very best players in the world. There was even a strange, almost comedic footnote to McIlroy's week that somehow captured the whole off-kilter feeling of the tournament. His own caddy bib had his name spelled incorrectly. Not once, but for a second time at this same event, a small but oddly fitting detail for a week where absolutely nothing seemed to go according to plan for the world number 2. Because here's the part of this story that goes way beyond one bad week in Memphis. This wasn't just a rough tournament, it's part of a pattern that's been building since April, and it's a pattern that should genuinely concern anyone who watches this sport closely. McIlroy's season actually started as well as it possibly could have. He successfully defended his Masters title at Augusta National back in the spring, his sixth major championship overall, and a genuinely historic achievement that completed his career Grand Slam the year before. That Sunday in Augusta was, without question, the high point of his entire year. Green jacket, history, validation. Since then, almost nothing has gone right. He finished tied for 32nd at the U.S. Open, tied for 40th at the Open Championship at Royal Birkdale, a finish that left him at just 1 under par for the entire week. And now this, a tournament where he was level par with 3 holes to go on day 1 before everything fell apart, followed by a final round that oscillated between genuine crisis and a fleeting glimpse of the old Rory before ending in disappointment yet again. There's another layer to this story worth understanding, and it makes the whole situation even more complicated. McIlroy actually skipped this exact tournament entirely last year. He made a deliberate decision at the start of the season to play fewer events, and the FedEx St. Jude Championship was one of the sacrifices. His FedExCup ranking was high enough at the time that he could afford to sit it out and still comfortably qualify for the next round of the playoffs. This year, everything was different. His position in the standings wasn't nearly as secure heading into the week, sitting around 12th, which meant playing became less of a choice and more of a necessity. He explained his reasoning publicly, saying it felt important to be present at the start of the playoffs this time around. And then this happened, arguably his worst performance of the entire year, on a course where he's historically struggled anyway, at the exact moment he chose to show up rather than sit out. It's also worth remembering just who McIlroy was paired with for those difficult opening rounds, because the contrast made everything feel even more painful in real time. He played alongside Scottie Scheffler for the first 2 rounds, watching the world number 1 card a steady, almost boring by comparison 68, while McIlroy unraveled a few feet away on the very same fairways. By the time the week ended, Scheffler had turned in one of the most dominant victories of the entire season, while McIlroy was left searching for answers under identical conditions, on the same golf course, at the same tee times. 2 players, 1 week, completely different outcomes. So what does all of this actually mean heading into the BMW Championship? Remember that number I mentioned back at the start, the one sitting quietly in the FedExCup standings? Here it is. McIlroy's rough week is now projected to drop him from 12th in the standings to somewhere closer to 15th. Only 3 spots. Not the kind of number that sounds dramatic on its own, but 3 spots is exactly the gap between comfortable and uncomfortable heading into a stretch where every single golfer left in the field is fighting for a spot in the season-ending Tour Championship. He'll still be safely through to St. Louis. This isn't a Jordan Spieth or Max Homa situation where an entire season came down to the final putt. But the cushion he had walking into Memphis just got noticeably thinner. Remember those 4 words I mentioned at the very start of this video? Here they are. Standing in that scoring tent, McIlroy said, quote, "I'm so far away from where I need to be." 4 words. Not buried in a post-round transcript nobody reads. Said directly, on camera, by a 6-time major champion who 3 months ago was slipping on a green jacket at Augusta. That's the kind of quote that tells you a superstar is genuinely searching for answers in real time, in front of everyone, with no easy fix in sight. And that's really the story here, isn't it? This isn't really about one bad tee shot into the water on Sunday, or one rough opening round. It's about a 6-time major champion, coming off arguably the greatest achievement of his career just months earlier, now openly admitting he doesn't fully recognize his own game right now. That's not a headline you see about Rory McIlroy very often, and it's exactly why this week in Memphis matters so much more than a simple 66th place finish would normally suggest. So heading into St. Louis in the BMW Championship, the question isn't really whether McIlroy qualifies, he almost certainly will. The real question is whether this version of Rory McIlroy, the one searching for consistency since April, can find something resembling his best golf again before the season quietly runs out. Because right now, by his own admission, he's further from that answer than anyone expected a defending Masters champion to be at this point in the year. There is at least one small silver lining buried in all of this, and it's worth mentioning before we close things out. McIlroy has historically been one of the very best players in the world at East Lake Golf Club, host of the season-ending Tour Championship, having won there 3 separate times across the last 9 seasons. The FedEx St. Jude Championship has simply never suited his game. He's never won in Memphis, and this week's struggles fit an established pattern rather than breaking a new one. So while this tournament was genuinely rough, it doesn't necessarily predict disaster at the courses still left on the schedule. History suggests this specific stretch of golf has just never been kind to him, regardless of form. What do you think is actually going wrong with Rory McIlroy's game right now? Is this just playoff rust after a long layoff and 3 weeks away from competitive golf in Ibiza and Greece? Or is there something deeper going on since his Masters win back in April? Drop your honest take in the comments because I genuinely want to know what you're seeing that the commentators aren't saying out loud. Make sure you're subscribed because our full BMW Championship coverage starts later this week, and if McIlroy's struggles continue in St. Louis, this story is about to get a lot bigger.